Hey chess fans, back with another game from the Caro-Kann course. This game actually was played by my coach that I play some training games with, and I've been playing the black side of this against him, and I've got some nice positions, and he decided to venture it out in a tournament game of his, and it went really well, and I thought it was an incredibly instructive game, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So here, White has played this last move, bishop to e3, which is the first move that we don't cover in the course. We actually just cover knight to d2 instead. But this is a pretty normal looking move, and there's no reason for us to disrupt the standard development. So we just bring the knight out to e7. Again, we're preparing this f6, castles, and e5 idea. So here, White did bring the knight out, supporting this, and their idea is they want to be able to play queen and have some pressure. So we play h6. We want to castle. We can't castle immediately because of some bishop h7 ideas. So this is a common preparatory move. So the queen comes out, we go ahead and castle, and now rook a to c1. And it seems like the White has developed really normally, and they're continuing on with this plan of playing c5 to try to crack at the center, which is a pretty reasonable idea. But there's something for us to notice here in that this conglomeration of pieces is a little bit cramped, which allows us to execute a nice idea that came up in one of my earlier games that I didn't find, and that my coach showed me about, and that he got to play out here. And the idea is to play f5. And we want to play f4, and this bishop really just doesn't have anywhere good to go. So in the move that White just played c4, the best thing that they can really do is to drop the bishop back, which seems kind of obnoxious, not something you want to do. In fact, actually, I got that backwards. They should have dropped the bishop back here instead. So the bishop will come back. We can actually play this move, and the bishop can't actually come back because we have this, and you can't capture because we can take the queen, and then we'll take the bishop. This pawn is ugly. This pawn is ugly, and we're doing great. So really, after this, the queen would have to come back here, and we can even just play knight f5, and we maybe have this awkward idea of taking on e3. White still wants to play c4, but if they play c4 and we capture and capture here, we have this idea of e5 later, which comes up, and these pawns are quite weak, and we'll be able to attack them. So this would give us a really nice position, and it's really the best way that White could have played, but it's really awkward to play the queen and the bishop back after you've just played them out to the sort of active squares on d3 and c2. So I don't expect a lot of people are going to play this way, even if it is the best way. This rook move, far more natural to play. So f5, and then c4 was what was chose. The point of c4 is to try to give some breathing room. So they're going to counter f4 with c5, and this is what we see. Counter, counter, we takes hitting our queen, but we get to take with check. And after the king, we take here, and we just want a clean pawn. As simple as that. Not only do we want a pawn, but we still have a pretty strong attack coming. We have this open f-file now. This rook can come across. e5 is still an idea. We have lots of pressure against this f3 square, which is something that's going to come up. So king to g1 was played. Makes sense. And now we have bishop takes, which is not a move that made a lot of sense to me. But it does actually make some sense because this pawn is weak, and we're going to attack it in a lot of really direct ways coming up. There are, of course, many alternative moves to grabbing here. You can simply bring this rook across. You can bring the queen out to f4. There's lots of good ways to handle this position. But capturing here makes a lot of sense. Even if it doesn't immediately make sense, because the point is that we're going to try to attack this d4 pawn. We're removing a defender from it. So White, of course, takes back. Otherwise, we were going to just grab this guy immediately. And here, the coach chose to play queen to g3. He said he saw the best move and calculated it, but he said he chickened out, which makes sense because I probably would have chickened out too. Because the best way to play is actually just to play rook takes f3. Again, really hitting hard against this d4 pawn. Giving up an exchange, we're already up one pawn, so we have one pawn for the exchange, and after takes, we can take again. And this knight is coming in, this knight is coming in, this rook is coming across, this queen is coming in. We have a really strong attack, and we have 2 pawns for the exchange already. So, for example, if queen to g2, just holding onto this pawn, preventing the queen from coming into g3, we can come across, adding an additional attacker. Tries to defend it again. We can bring this knight up, and we have lots of threats. We have threats of here, we have threats of here. We even have ideas of bringing the knight into this way. So, for example, if it tries to keep the king knight out of here, well, we just go this direction, and after it takes, or sorry, not takes, but moves, we can grab this one. We're picking our exchange back up, and we have 3 pawns already. For example, king moves out of the way, we take, takes again, and we just bring our queen up, and we're doing fantastic. These guys are going to roll, and this is just absolutely crushing position. But it was a lot to calculate from here. It seems really natural because we get to look at this with the engine, but it's a lot to think about. And so queen to g3 definitely makes sense. The queen comes across to defend the knight, because we were still thinking about giving this sacrifice and taking here. So then rook to f6, just defending this pawn. And white's got to figure out what to do. It's not easy to make a move that makes a lot of sense. White kind of wants to leave the rooks and queens here, adding some pressure, which is going to stop us from being so active with this rook. And so they chose to play a3. Seems reasonable. It's not sure what else they're going to do. There doesn't appear to be any other really useful moves. And so we just bring a second rook across. Great. This rook comes to f1. Again, not wanting us to sacrifice here. If, for example, let's say b4, just a random move, well, now this is quite strong. And you can't really grab it. I mean, you can't take it that way at all. And the queen doesn't obviously want to take. So rook to f1 was, oops, not here, but rook to f1 being forced. Now we bring this knight up. Now, instead of bringing the knight, there was another interesting idea that we could have chose and a few moves. But just the idea of playing g5 and forcing this up. But it makes sense to bring in another piece. The idea is we're probably going to head to f4. Maybe we're supporting here. Maybe we're going to play here at some point. The bishop goes ahead and snaps. We grab it with the queen. Again, we could have taken with the rook probably. But it was better to leave the rook this way. For example, rook c3 comes, and maybe this knight will get a chance to move. And we're doing better bringing the queen back, I think. So the queen comes, defends this pawn, which is going to free up this rook, which is the idea. So white continues on with what they have to do. And we just play a6, slowing that down. The king tries to drop out of the way so that this pawn can capture here. We're not threatening a sacrifice. And here, queen to e4 was played. And I don't think that this is really best. It's clear that we can't take because the pawn grabs. This knight is still pinned because the king moved. But a better way to play is just to recognize that this is still the weak pawn that we want to attack. And just rook to f4 is a really nice move. We're threatening now to immediately take this guy. So, for example, tries to defend it. Now we have rook to e4. And the point is we're freeing the f4 square up. We're going to bring the other rook, and we're just going to put everything we have against this pawn. So, for example, the queen moves out of the way. We bring this rook up. Maybe he tries to attack the rook, but now we can just grab the pawn. And you grab this way, and we'll take with the queen. And this knight is well defended, and we've won a second pawn for the... not even an exchange anymore, because we've gotten that back. So we'd be doing fantastic in this line. Queen to e4 was played. This queen moves out of the way, and now the rook comes up with sort of a similar idea of being able to grab this pawn. And so white kicks the queen, and we move it out of the way, and this pawn comes forward, and now that this queen is distracted, this sacrifice comes back into the picture. We're not worried about this pawn. We're just going to grab here, takes with check. It's possible to take this way as well, but we give this check, and here white resigned because there's an unstoppable mate. For example, king to h1, we take with check, and we're going to go with check, and everything's coming with check. Checks, except for now, a quiet move. We play here. White has no way to stop queen to h2. So I thought this was a really nice, instructive game. A really cool display of this f5 idea, right here, taking advantage of the fact that this guy has nowhere to go, and it's really awkward to try to create a space for this bishop. And really nice, just coming up. Sometimes this idea happens when the knight has gone to e2, and it's still awkward because then the pawn can go all the way to f3. But definitely remembering this f5 idea in this exchange variation, the Caro-Kann, is quite nice. And then just following it up with this, going back to this idea of taking on f3 and not playing with the queen, which is still strong, but instead just giving up this sacrifice, winning a second pawn for the exchange with a huge attack to come. Really, really instructive and nice game. As usual, I did put the PGN to this in a library on chess.com. That'll be a link to that in the description. And then also check out the Caro-Kann course. It's really nice openings. You get to play cool games like this. Anyhow, thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.